What if George Zimmerman had known Trayvon Martin before that fateful day? What if Darren Wilson knew Michael Brown? What if the person who killed officers Ramos and Lou knew those officers as people? Think of the difference it might have made had they met just once before and took part in a conversation that revealed themselves to each other as fellow human beings. Do you think their actions on that day might have been different? Our country faces a great dilemma, ladies and gentlemen. This has been a dilemma that has caused so much war. This dilemma is between minority youth and police. Now, I wish not to gravitate you towards any discharge of blame. Instead, I wish to introduce to you a solution that aims to save the lives of both those who aim to protect us and those they aim to protect. Now, I'm sure we've all heard phrases like, never judge a book by its cover. Well, I like to tell you my story today, who I am and what I do. But I ask you, please don't judge a book by its cover or its color. As a black teenager, from time to time, I feel like a one-dimensional character in a novel authored by society. Oftentimes, the story doesn't end well. The media, for example, in its many shapes and forms, influences millions of minds, opinions, and concepts even before thoughts of reason. This has negatively affected me in my life, but it has also affected other youth like me. It also has an effect on officers of the law with regards to one specific issue, but I'll get back to that later. I live in a single-parent home where my mother is the sole breadwinner. I don't speak with or have a relationship with my father, and I live in an urban neighborhood where violence is not uncommon. I am a walking stereotype in a world where these attributes don't typically equate to success. But I believe that I am bigger than the stereotype, and many others believe this about themselves as well. There is no doubt some youth are easily led astray and get engulfed by this dangerous world. But not all. I am more than the status quo. We are more. My journey to becoming a part of a solution began on my couch, a place where most teenagers in my neighborhood refer to as their bedroom. It began with a breaking news story that yet another black unarmed teenager had been killed. When I would hear these stories in the news, I would begin to imagine myself walking in my neighborhood and being followed by a stranger who might think I look threatening. When your mind starts imagining these scenarios, you begin to ask yourself questions like, could that really happen to me? How do I protect myself? Could I even protect myself? Can I trust the police officers who took oaths to protect me? And to me, the last question is where the crux of the problem lies. I saw these officers as nameless, faceless entities, not people, just a source of fear. There is a great disconnect between law enforcement officials and at-risk youth just like me. I felt and continue to feel personally obligated to do everything in my power to affect change, not only for myself, but for my family, my community, and my country. First, let's take a quick look at the problem. As a society, we can tend to overlook the very people we encounter on a day-to-day basis, especially those who we don't feel could potentially have an actual impact on our lives. Teenagers are no different. At the same time, racial profiling and the overuse of force, specifically directed towards people of color, has reached a tipping point in this country. And for far too long, the issue has been relegated to the bottom tier of societal problems. Unfortunately, African Americans and at-risk youth don't have the luxury to push this issue aside. They must face these issues day by day. Law enforcement officials and at-risk youth aren't necessarily known for their great working relationship or their effective communication skills with regards to each other. This has to change. Everyone must understand both sides to every story, and each of these groups should try to understand each other. This is where I began to form an idea for how these two groups could potentially reach some common ground. So here's what I'm doing to connect these two groups in a way that will help break down some of the barriers. I have started an initiative called I Am, where the main goal is to break down the walls of communication between authority figures and the citizens they serve, specifically students who fall into the at-risk category. I want to form bonds and create experiences that will influence the perceptions of everyone involved, starting with my school, Mentorship Academy. The initiative organizes events and discussions dedicated to creating connections between youth and the police officers in their communities. With greater exposure to the history and consideration of these young citizens, and a better understanding of who these officers are as people, comes a greater understanding and consideration for how these individuals encounter each other in day-to-day life. So this is how it starts. At first, a group of students is asked to volunteer, to take part in an open dialogue in what they consider to be a safe environment, typically the school. I tell them they will be talking with several members of the law enforcement community that serve the streets they live on. With the school administrator, I talk to the students beforehand to make sure they understand what the goal of the meeting is, and so they can ask me questions about why this is happening to begin with. Then they start thinking about the kinds of things they've always wanted to know, or want the officers to know about them. I also speak with the officers involved to let them know that this is about benefiting everyone, including them. This is an us problem that we're trying to solve, a human problem. The focus of the first discussion is for people to introduce themselves and tell a little bit about who they are and some of the experiences they've encountered with each group. Then they take part in a question and answer session where they can feel free to ask open and honest questions about one another. Eventually, these questions become more centered around the individual's lives outside of the groups they've been identified as being associated with. For example, "Hey, Officer Stan, how long have you lived in Baton Rouge?" Or, "Hey, Joseph, do you actually follow the Saints or just wear the jersey?" Slowly, the layers start to peel back, and we're looking at a room full of human beings. True dialogue happens between two people, not an officer and a black teen. Labels start to melt away, and connections and relationships are formed. Future aspects of the initiative include branching out to other community leaders and public figures to find mentors for the youth involved, and to organize projects where the two groups could work towards a common goal together. Could you imagine what could be achieved if an officer and a black teen built a house together? Will they even remember thinking of each other as just another stranger? It's harder to judge Rafael Ramos rather than some random cop, or Trayvon Martin instead of that kid in a hoodie. One last piece of the initiative is to organize support for legislation that could affect the way our police departments operate. If we made it a priority to afford our officers more time outside of their official duties to spend in the communities they serve with the people they encounter all the time, everyone would have a name to a face, a history, consideration. I'll leave you with this. I believe stories of oppression don't have to be told more than once. The high-profile killings of police and youth must stop. This must not carry into our future. We must place familiarity over fear, mutuality over murder, reason over race. The goal here is not to tear one group down only to exonerate another, but to see each other as we are. Not killer cops or thugs, but as humans. I am Michael Brown just as I am Darren Wilson. Black and white, rich and poor, mean-spirited and kind, both the educated and the illiterate, both the good and the bad live in this vulnerable world. But we all want the same things out of life. We want to live, and we must learn how to truly live with each other. I am Rashaud Red. I am not a stereotype. I am human. I am going to be a part of the solution, and I'm trying to make a difference. And so can you. I am, you are, we are more. You guys have been incredible. Thank you for this moment.